Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason. Here are your hosts, Richard Saunders and Stefan Sojka0.
Richard, it's wonderful to be here again in the Zone, episode 19.
And they said it wouldn't last past episode 19. Oh, this is episode 19. Whoops.
No,
thanks,
that's
Stefan.
what I said about 18.
18.
Oh, we showed them though, didn't we?
We did, and here we are, back again.
Yeah, it's great to be here. What another great show lined up too.
I reckon. Now, I spoke to Dr. Caroline Watt. Now, she studies parapsychology at the University of Edinburgh.
Hang on, you might have to explain that. I don't have my Wikipedia in front of me. A parapsychology. What does that cover?
I thought you meant you wanted me to explain Edinburgh.
That needs a lot of explaining. Some freaky locals there. Parapsychology.
Yeah, sort of looking scientifically at the strange and the mysterious. And she does a course about it, a sort of a mail order or internet online course, and we'll be finding out all about that.
So is that kind of with a sceptical bent or with a bit of a semi-believer bent or a bit of an open mind? Or what's...
A bit of everything,
I think. Skeptics don't have an open mind, let me tell you. No, but yeah, does she kind of subscribe to any of these things, or is it just purely investigation?
It's more or less giving people a background about what parapsychology is all about, using the scientific method, of course.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, that's followed by a grain of salt with Eran Segev. He's going to be looking at the Victorian Bushfires.
Oh, I would hazard a guess that pretty much everyone listening around the world would have heard about this.
Oh, yeah.
Such a great disaster locally here, but certainly the news has spread like wildfire. So excuse the pun.
Yes. After that, I'm going to be chatting with Duane Hamacher. He's the president of the Macquarie University Skeptics. I was there just the other day to be on their Skeptics booth at their open week at the Macquarie University, and I must have bent about 50 spoons, I think.
Really? You would have been a bit of a celebrity guest there, wouldn't you?
Well, that's what they said.
Now, they're a good bunch, actually. I think I was there for one of your early presentations there. They're a great crowd.
Yeah, you were there for one of my talks, a great bunch of skeptics. We have Dr. Rachie reports looking at the fun and games of the anti-vaccination loons.
Oh, yeah. Loons? What do you mean?
We'll ask Dr. Rachie. I'm sure she'll tell us.
She'll tell us all about it.
And to wrap up the show, we've got the think tank, of course.
Quite a popular segment from some of the reports we've been getting.
Yeah, we get people emailing us wanting to be in the think tank. Unfortunately, they're like in the United States. So if we say, if you want to fly over and join us in the club,
nothing
sure.
an airfare and a hotel bill won't fix.
Now, apart from that, I mean, if that's not enough, my week's been taken up by helping one of our reporters, Dr. Karen Stolz who's now the editor of the Skeptic magazine, in putting that together.
Oh, it's a great publication. About to become even better.
About to become even better. They'll be hitting our subscribers next week, I think.
Next week. And you've been using some high-tech software like InDesign, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's pretty techie stuff, Richard.
Pretty techie stuff.
Oh, geez, I don't know how you do it. All this, he's got his own. He's done the TV show, The One. He's got the podcast happening, The Zone. He's got the mag happening. He's got the website. How do you do it?
I don't think I do enough. So, look, I tell you what, I'm going to go have a little lie down now, maybe get some Reiki.
That's a good idea.
Maybe take some herbal tea.
Good. Yeah, some homeopathic remedies would be lovely for you. Maybe a bit of gut flush, bit of the
good old gut flush.
Cleansing.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, gut flush.
Excellent.
We'll listen to the show and we'll come back.
No worries. Have a good nap, Richard. And folks, enjoy the program, episode 19.
Dr. Caroline Watt is a senior lecturer of psychology at Edinburgh University. She also specialises in parapsychology and runs an online course. And we have Caroline on the line now from Edinburgh. Good morning, is it, or afternoon or evening?
Good evening from Edinburgh.
And good morning from Sydney. I love these time zones. I'm very curious indeed about what you do there, the parapsychology. And first of all, can you spend a moment in trying to dispel some of the myths and stereotypes around what you do?
Well, I'm not a ghostbuster. I'm an academic. My job title is actually Senior Lecturer in Psychology. But my area of expertise is parapsychology. So a lot of what I do is just regular, I teach statistics, I supervise students doing postgraduate degrees and undergraduate degrees. And the research I do, some of it is about the psychology of belief in the paranormal, which is pretty straightforward psychology. And some of it is about testing the hypothesis that people have paranormal abilities. So it's a bit of a mixture, and it's never going out and sitting in a supposedly haunted location waiting for things to go bump in the night.
Oh, that's a pity. I do that sometimes, and I'm still waiting for that bump to occur, but sometimes I get out there and do that. When you say you do some of the testing there, and if you're not waiting for things to go bump in the night exactly, what sort of tests or examinations have you been involved with?
A study that's recently finished is with a postgraduate student of mine, where we're looking into the claim of distance healing or psychic healing. And we did a little trial with our arthritis patients where it was a double-blinded design where the patients didn't know whether or not they were receiving distant healing. So that would be a test of the hypothesis that a person who claims that they can heal someone at a distance, whether that actually has any effect when you ask the patients in the trial to report their pain symptoms and their well-being, their subjective report of their well-being. So that's a sort of example of the kind of thing that I've done recently.
Do you find that many people who are involved with these sort of tests, especially students, are somewhat hopeful or optimistic of a positive outcome, or are they simply ready to accept the outcome, be it positive or negative?
You mean not the volunteers in the experiments, but the actual students who are running the studies?
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase that. Maybe both. I mean, maybe you get people who are volunteering who also have preconceptions and expect one thing or another.
I would say the volunteers, they tend to be curious, but they're curious about the paranormal. They may have had the odd experience, but they don't generally regard themselves as psychic. So we don't work with people who come to Edinburgh and say, I'm psychic, let me show you how psychic I am under controlled conditions. Right. So we don't work with that sort of person. The students, they vary very much. I mean, some students, I think that the best approach to have is the proper scientific approach, which should be questioning. And that's a skeptical approach, actually. It's questioning. It's just saying, well, I'm going to test this hypothesis. What does the data tell us? And that's just straightforward science as far as I'm concerned.
You're absolutely right. Do you suffer, doing what you do there, do you suffer the jibes and jokes from any other people or departments saying you're the moulder of Edinburgh University, or X-File jokes or silly things like that?
No, not from my colleagues. They probably know better than to try to do that. You do get the odd corny joke about, oh, didn't you see that coming? But no, I mean, I think that those who know what I do respect the work that I do. They can see that we're attempting to do proper science in a responsible way. And it's a very good subject. Parapsychology is a great subject for teaching students about methodology. Because if you're going to test the claim that there's this supposed ability to communicate through thought alone, you've got to be really careful about how you design your experiments. So I think students can learn a lot about methodology in science through testing paranormal hypotheses. That's
very interesting you should say that, because when I'm not busily working on the Skeptic Zone, of course, I'm doing a show for students, a school show here in Australia called Mystery Investigators, and one of the tests we do live on stage for high school students to demonstrate how a double-blind test works is we use the claim of water dowsing or water divining. And the kids really get a kick out of it because it's a fascinating claim and the sticks wobble and move, and before they know it, they're being taught how to do a double-blind test. So I think personally, and I guess I'm biased like this, but I really think it's a great way to teach science because you've got the hook there, which engages the imagination.
Definitely. It's something that just puts bums on seats, as you would say. The students love it. And the students in my course that I teach, a final year undergraduate course in parapsychology, and although it's not designed as a methodology course, they all come out of it saying that they've actually learned, incidentally, they've learned a huge amount about methodology in psychology by studying parapsychology. And what you were saying about blind methods, apparently, and I'm not a historian, but I've read historians who said that the first use of blind methods in science was in testing the claim of mesmerists. That they could influence a patient at a distance. And they did this by putting a curtain or a barrier between the mesmerist and the patient. And that was a claim of a paranormal influence. And it just shows you that it can push methodology, straightforward things like placebo effects and using blind methods can arise out of testing unusual or anomalous claims.
Absolutely. And as I said before, I think it's so engaging. I mean, there's a certain percentage of the population, yourself and myself certainly included, and what I find many students, for whom this topic is endlessly fascinating. And I note that in a recent interview you did for the Skeptic magazine here in Australia, you quoted as saying that it's just so interesting what you do.
Well, you never know what's going to happen next. I mean, a lot of it is normal academic stuff, like looking at exam papers and meeting with students. But you get phone calls from people who are having strange things happening in their house. You have to try to discuss with them what might be going on. And you get a lot of approaches from the media, because it's interesting from that point of view. So there's communication with the members of the public directly and with through the media to the public, which I think is an important part of my job.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about how your online course works and what it's like to have students from all over the world, including, I must say, some here in Australia?
Yeah, this was my big project last year. I sort of developed this course from out of nothing, and never having done anything like this before. And it's an open studies course, which means that you don't need to have any qualifications to join. You also do not receive any qualification from taking part in the course. So it's for personal education or personal interest only. And you come on to our website and you can register for the course online. And then the course materials, the course runs over 11 weeks. The course materials are all presented on what we call a virtual learning environment. That's a platform that the Edinburgh University uses. And the lovely thing about it is that, that you can have people from all around the world, which I think is fantastic, although I have to admit it's biased towards the English language. Yeah. You've got to be able to speak English, you've got to be semi-computer literate in order to be able to download files and so on. But it also allows you to abandon the usual lecture format, which I think can be quite passive and boring for students. Even the most interesting lecturer, it's a sort of one-way interaction. And with an online course, you can have all sorts of different materials. So I've got interviews with experts, I've got self-test quizzes, I've got downloads of journal articles, I've got book chapters. So there's lots of different kinds of materials that you can use to help engage the students. Probably the best thing the students like is their discussion groups, which are just basically blogs. And each week there's a themed discussion group, and students post an essay or a sort of starter discussion, and then they all discuss it amongst themselves. So they actually learn a lot from considering what each other is saying and perhaps correcting each other if someone says something or raises a question. So it's a wonderful way of engaging with the subject with a lot of variety of learning materials.
And I imagine that you also learn a lot from your students.
Yes, I think it's a sort of reminder of the different perspectives that people are bringing to the subject. The students themselves, some of them, actually my first course ran just before Christmas, and I had a little questionnaire at the end of it. And I was asking them what their beliefs were about the paranormal, because I really didn't know who my customers were. And it was interesting. It was an even balance of skeptics, what you call skeptics and believers. Some people were quite strong proponents, but they were still willing to listen to alternative viewpoints. And there were other people who were strong counter-advocates who, thankfully, so far have been respectful of other people's opinions, even if they don't agree with them. So it's very nice to see that interaction and to learn, what assumptions other people are bringing to the subject.
I imagine it is, and I imagine there are, as you say, there are people coming on to somehow confirm what they already think they know in some respects. And have you encountered the case where you'd get a very strong believer coming along and being somewhat crestfallen or disbelieving or dismissive of the results if they're negative?
Well, I had one student who was disappointed because he thought the course would teach him how to test psychic claimants. So he wanted to be given a sort of practical guide, as it were, to how you test people who claim certain psychic abilities. And the course is actually much broader than that, so that's covered in 1 week, but not in any comprehensive way.
Right.
And I've had a couple of students who said they were a bit disappointed because the literature was less clear-cut than they thought. So they thought that there was strong evidence for psi, and actually the material that I'm showing them shows that there's debate about that. And I wouldn't say they were disappointed. Perhaps they're just sort of brought up short and they sort of realised they didn't have the full picture before.
Yes, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Do you find that there is a great misconception about the whole area?
Well, you can get misconceptions on both sides, of course, because sometimes skeptics who haven't familiarised themselves with literature, will make sweeping statements such as, all the methodology's poor, or there's no positive results anywhere. And in fact, there are some quite well-done studies that have come up with positive results. And then the question is then, well, how do you interpret those results? So there's strong statements made on either side. Some believers have... Perhaps they've been misled by some parapsychologists who've overstated the case. And I just feel that, from my point of view, it's certainly not an easy answer to the question of what's the evidence for psi. I don't think the evidence is there to provide the answer yet.
Right. That's an interesting way to put it. Now, is it, from your point of view, just getting back to the online aspects of it, is it a really successful way to teach, in your opinion? Or, I guess it's relatively new, this whole approach, but we are getting on in this decade, so it's nothing too novel. Do you find it being quite successful for you at the moment?
Yes, it is. The first course sold out overnight, so it was fully booked within 24 hours of it being advertised. The university, I think, is the way for the future. Certainly at Edinburgh, we're not quite up to speed with online learning yet. I still get the feeling, and when I was developing the course, I felt like a pioneer, which shouldn't really be in 2009. This should be normal, and it did. There are a lot of people who had to learn how to make this course happen. It wasn't straightforward, but to me, it's the future. It sort of saves a lot of resources. You can learn and have access to material without the travel, without using the lecture theatres and so on. And you can do it at your own time, a time when it suits you. So to me, it's the way that future education should happen. Now, my course is non-accredited, which means that I don't mark any assessments. And if it was to be an accredited course, then there would be more engagement with the students. They would have to submit essays, for example, and I'd have to mark them. So there'd still be some of the traditional assessment would have to take place. But you'd be much more flexible because that could be sent in online rather than the student putting it in your pigeonhole. So for me, it's the way ahead.
Oh, I totally agree. In fact, even right now, here we are chatting with each other. And it's face-to-face because we're both on our each other's video screens, as it were.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it?
It's quite remarkable.
I just hope my internet connection continues to be reliable.
Well, so far, so good. Now, finally, Caroline, this has been wonderful to chat with you. It is a fascinating topic. I mean, it's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I can't see how I could ever be bored with this topic. There's always something interesting or new. And even if it largely does boil down to more or less psychology, because you are looking at the way people believe things and why they believe them and why they've been led to look at things a certain way. So I just love the fact that there are people like you out there exploring this, and online, what could be better. If my listeners are now so keen to join your course and join the queue for your course, I imagine, how can they get some more information?
Well, if they go to the Koestler Parapsychology Unit website, then they'll find some pages about the course on there and a link to the registration page. So just look for us on Google. You should find us quite easily. And I think you're quite right. It's whether or not psi exists. The fact is that lots of people believe in the paranormal, and lots of people have experiences that they think are paranormal.
Yes.
Therefore, to me, it's a kind of a no-brainer that people should be investigating these questions, both from a psychology point of view and at least give some consideration to the paranormal issue as well.
Well, if it wasn't for this whole topic, I'd have to go back and do web pages for one of our large banks, which I used to do, and I'd rather do this, believe me.
Absolutely.
Well, Caroline, thank you very much for talking to the Skeptic Zone all the way over there in Scotland.
It's my pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I shall.
Grain of salt. Grain of salt. Grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt. You gotta take it with a...
Hello, this is Eran Segev, taking life with a grain of salt. As our listeners probably all know, the state of Victoria in southern Australia was gripped by bushfires earlier this month. The bushfires were unprecedented in their severity and the amount of damage they caused. More than 200 people died, at least 1,800 homes have been lost, and 2 towns were completely razed in what was Australia's worst peacetime disaster. A disaster of this magnitude is sure to raise some questions of culpability, and the blame game started while some fires were still raging. Some of those blamed were either obviously at fault, such as the arsonist who started at least some of the fires, or obviously not at fault, such as the Victorian Parliament, which was blamed by some religious whack job of causing the fires by decriminalising abortion in Victoria. Yet for others, the case is not so clear. Among those whose potential responsibility was mentioned and should be considered, I have noted in particular the environmental movement, the residents themselves, and global warming. It could take experts many months to come to some conclusions as to the causes. Even then, the answers are unlikely to be clear-cut or show one of those mentioned as responsible to the exclusion of the others, so any attempt by me to pass judgment would be ill-conceived. I therefore do not intend to come to any conclusions, just to raise some questions about some of the claims made. The case for the culpability of the environmental movement is based around 2 fire management activities that can be undertaken in bush areas: clearing and fuel reduction burning. Clearing is the removal of fuel material, such as trees and shrubs, from areas surrounding properties to be protected. The scale of clearing can range from removing trees to overhanging parts of a house, through the creation of a clear area with a radius of 2 tree heights, to clear felling acres of land around the property. Fuel reduction burning is the process of using favorable conditions, such as cool days with no wind, to burn the leaves, branches and bark that accumulate under trees. Because trees are slower to catch fire than this dry material, fires are less likely to start in fuel-reduced areas, and fires that do not have the benefit of this fuel are likely to be easier to control. The claim that puts the environmental movement in the hot seat is that their political representatives, the Australian Greens, have used their political power to prevent residents in thick bush areas from clearing the land around their properties and to stop the authorities from conducting fuel reduction burning. Opinion pieces, letters and calls to radio talk shows blaming the Greens appeared in Australian media as early as the Monday following Black Saturday and continued as the death toll rose and the enormity of the situation became clear. One particularly vocal critic was a resident who was fined thousands of dollars by the local council after he ignored their bylaws and cleared the land around his property, which then survived the fires. On the face of it, the criticism seems to be justified, but a few questions come up. The 2 most important ones, in my opinion, are whether the claims are actually true beyond a few anecdotes, and whether clearing and fuel reduction burning would have made a significant difference. To establish that the claims are true, a pattern of refusing permission to perform clearing needs to be shown. Such a pattern would need to also be different from the past, in which the Greens were not as politically powerful as they are now. In particular, the laws and regulations will need to have either changed or more stringently enforced in recent times than when the towns affected by the bushfires were founded. That last point is crucial. We know the residents of those towns chose to live in bush areas, and by that they implicitly accepted some risk. The question of whether the risk was increased after they were already in possession of their land is a key question. I have not been able to determine whether there has been such a pattern. There is a lot of information available about this question, but I could not find any that came from a neutral source. When information presented matches the interests of the entity presenting it, I tend to be cautious about accepting it. It is also obviously possible, or even likely, that the situation varies between different localities. Whatever the case may be, I will leave this question open. To answer the second question, some background is required about the fires on this specific occasion and what was unique about them. Bushfires are common in the southeast of Australia. Indeed, many Australian species of trees rely on fire to rejuvenate and reproduce. Droughts are also fairly common in the southeast of Australia, though one lasting 10 years, such as the one Victoria is in the midst of, has not been experienced since the 1930s. Most importantly, Victoria had been experiencing a heatwave that would make Hades squirm. Maximum temperatures regularly exceeded 40 degrees Celsius and were only below 30 for 5 days in the 3 weeks that culminated with the deadly fires on the 7th of February. On that day, the temperatures soared to 46.4 degrees. In eucalypt forests, which are usually enveloped in a blue haze of etheric oils, such temperatures mean that the concentration of oils is higher and the air is almost combustible. Add to that mix wind speeds in excess of 30 km per hour, with gusts of up to 50 km per hour, and it is not entirely certain that under such circumstances, fuel reduction would have made much of a difference. Some of the stories told by people who were there, including firefighters, described a wall of fire much higher than the trees and heat that surpassed anything they had experienced before. Others described the fire rolling downhill and through cleared areas spanning hundreds of meters, or moving at speeds of many kilometers per hour, both of which cannot be explained by excessive fuel, and both indicate that properties that had land cleared around them would not necessarily have been spared, which is exactly what had occurred in many places. Firefighters repeatedly described the fires as being different to anything they had seen before and as unstoppable. And finally on this point, to the person who was fined for clearing land around his house. Liam Sheehan had cleared to 100 meters around his property, as opposed to the 6 meters allowed by the law, or the 1.5 tree heights recommended by CSIRO, and was subsequently fined $50,000. He attributes the survival of his property to the clearing, but other properties in other areas that had larger clear areas around them did not survive. It would be fair to assume that the fact that Mr. Sheehan himself and his son and daughter are all members of the Country Fire Authority and are experienced firefighters might have had something to do with it. Surely they would be better equipped to protect their home than most. This case raises the same question I mentioned earlier of what the rules were when Mr. Sheehan bought his land. If the laws prohibited clearing at the time, then it is not at all clear that he is in the right, even if the outcome for him was the saving of his property. I have been unable to establish whether that is the case, so that question too will remain open. It is worth noting, though, that Mr. Sheehan is on record saying that he is going to try to get his fine reversed. The descriptions of the weather in the weeks leading to the fires and the long drought naturally lead to global warming as a probable cause. But here too a few questions are raised. For one, global warming is a statistical phenomenon. It does not mean that temperatures get higher every year or in every location. At the same time that Victoria has been suffering from a heat wave and temperatures 20 degrees higher than average, Sydney in eastern New South Wales was experiencing only a slight increase in temperatures. But parts of western New South Wales were having a similar experience to that of the Victorians. Then, in the week after the fires, temperatures throughout much of the 3 areas just mentioned dropped to several degrees below average. To our international listeners, Victoria is south of New South Wales. The fires were about 800 kilometers south of Sydney. Since Australia is in the southern hemisphere, you would expect that moving 800 kilometers southward would make the weather colder, not warmer. But climate and weather are not as simple as that. The drought, which may have contributed to the fires, has also been linked to global warming. but while clearly a link cannot be ruled out, the level of certainty of such a claim cannot be considered very high in an arid continent such as Australia, in which fertile areas are around the corner from desert and which has suffered long droughts in the past. So both the drought and the heat wave may be linked to global warming. Some might even say they are likely to be linked, but a long-term pattern would need to be established before specific events can be attributed to global warming. The last party to have been blamed, though not by many, are the residents themselves. The claims against the residents were mostly of two types: that they resided in a high-risk area in ways which increased the risk, and that they failed to protect themselves and their properties. The first claim centers around the basic risk of living in a bushfire-prone area and the location of some of the towns at tops of ridges. When there's a fire close by, the last place you want to be is uphill from it. If you're on a ridge, you might have fires coming up from two different directions, and your only escape is along the ridge. If the escape route is also blocked by a fire, the situation can only be described as extremely serious. The problem for residents in this case is that they would have had to be aware of this risk and might reasonably have had an expectation that planning authorities would have prohibited the establishment of towns in places that could so easily become death traps. Many of the residents in affected areas would not experience bush people, but rather people who moved out of cities in search of more rural lifestyles. They could not be expected to be experts on the risks of living in the bush. The second claim, that the residents failed to protect themselves and their properties, is based on the fact that few people stay to protect their properties, as is often the Aussie tradition in cases of bushfires. Well, all I have to say to those who make that criticism is that they should watch the videos that some residents took of the huge flames approaching so quickly and listen to the words of the firefighters. This was not just any bushfire, and if more people stayed behind, the death toll would very likely have been higher. I have tried in this talk to raise questions and not jump to conclusions. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, I think the true causes are varied, probably include all elements mentioned to varying degrees, and it will probably take a long time of expert work to sort out what has happened and what could be done to perhaps alleviate some of the risk of a repeat. I would urge listeners to take a skeptical approach. Ask questions. Don't make up your mind before the evidence is in, and take the claims made by those with an agenda with a grain of salt.
Grain of salt. Grain of salt. You gotta take it with a...
Well, I'm here at Macquarie University. In fact, we're just going to lunch. I'm with Duane Hamacher. Is that how I pronounce your name? Hamacher. And Tiffany Day. Hi, Tiff.
Hi.
Tiffany, of course, a reporter for the Skeptic Zone, and we've spent the morning bending spoons, water divining, talking about ghosts here at the open week at Macquarie University. Now, Duane, this is the third day now. How is it going?
It has gone fantastic. I've been really impressed with the amount of people that have come in and showed interest. We've had almost 100 people, actually probably more than 100 people, because it looks like you had about 15 or 20 people sign up in that last hour.
Yeah.
So we've had over 100 responses, a lot of people coming in, a lot of interest been generated, and I've been quite surprised. I didn't expect to get more than 30, 40 people all week, and we've already almost tripled that amount.
Now, I must say the old shtick of spoon bending is serving us well.
It is. A lot of people are impressed. Some don't really care so much, but for the most part, people have been very, very impressed by it, and that's actually drawn several people into the group.
We had one girl shrieking just a moment ago. It was quite funny. No, it's very good to see. And an interesting comment I heard was somebody, one young student was telling me how she was interested suddenly when she heard me say haunted houses. Now, I don't know if there's any haunted locations around this neck of the woods.
I think pretty much everywhere there's supposedly haunted houses. I think you have to go further up into the Blue Mountains or down by the rocks to really get the authentic haunted houses.
The authentic, yes.
Yes, of course.
As opposed to those fake haunted houses.
Yes, well, you can't see my quotation marks in the air, but yes, the authentic haunted houses. There are ghost tour groups down in the rocks quite frequently, and I actually walk past them when I go to work at the observatory, and they've got a guy in a dark cape that he's talking all melodramatically, and I kind of have to walk through the middle of the group every time, and it's interesting to hear some of the stuff they talk about. At the observatory, I've actually had people ask me if the grounds were haunted, and sometimes I just say no, but if I'm feeling a bit cheeky, sometimes I'll tell them stories about how astronomers have mysteriously died over the years.
Well, they used to hang people on that hill, in the early days of the settlement.
Oh, of course. There's always hangings everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's supposedly a little girl that haunts the place as well. But some of the girls actually got very frightened and asked me to stop talking when we were in the telescope because they were getting scared.
Oh boy. Boy. Well, it's really encouraging to be here and to see all the people come along and to your Skeptic stand. Now, if people want to find out more about Macquarie Skeptics, where do they head?
MacquarieSkeptics.com. Everything is there. We've got all of our events. We have a newsletter coming out this weekend on the 27th, 6th, something like that. One of those days this weekend. We have the newsletter coming out, just full of articles, puzzles, details of all the events coming up, including Skeptics Week, which will be coming up in about 2 weeks. All that is on there. Links, everything.
So, especially listeners in Australia, skeptical students out there, contact the Macquarie Skeptics. They can give you some pointers about starting your own skeptical outfit in your university.
Hi, I'm Alistair Tate, host of the new bi-weekly podcast, The Pseudoscientists, the official podcast of the Young Australian Skeptics. Join Elliot Birch, Darley Breedis, Jason Ball, Jack Scanlon, Tay Rush, and myself to hear what our generation have to say about quackery, science, and the issues that concern us. Subscribe to our podcast, located at youngozskeptics.com.
You're listening to The Skeptic Zone. I'm Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Dr. Rachie Reports. With recent talk about how the anti-vaccine crowd have affected rates of vaccination in the UK and the States, I thought it might be interesting to look closer to home to see how Australia stacks up. This week, Medicare, which is Australia's government-run health body, released figures from the Australian Childhood Immunisation Register, which details the rate of immunisation in Australia. The latest figures are from December 2008, and on the face of it, it seems we are doing pretty well. For kids aged up to 15 months, the national average for immunisation is 91%, with the lowest levels being 89.9% for Western Australia. The national average falls to 88.4% in the up to 5 years old group, with the lowest compliance of 85.5% in South Australia. But when you consider that approximately 90% vaccination is needed to obtain herd immunity, however this depends on the vaccine and the disease, these figures are encouraging. Now, Rob Menzies from the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance said that in some cases where there are low vaccination rates, these are often more prevalent where well-educated parents did their own research and believed the myths that vaccines did more harm than good. And this was reflected in figures for Sydney's exclusive eastern suburbs, which includes the Harbour View well-to-do suburbs of Double Bay and Vaucluse. Now, these were ranked the worst, with only 80% of children in these areas being immunised. And this was followed closely by the areas of Lismore, Alstonville and Byron Bay, which are areas known for their alternative lifestyles. So this is not a big surprise. Now, since these figures have been released, there has been much discussion and speculation about why the wealthy suburbs are seemingly less likely to get their kids vaccinated. One journalist described the parents as selfish dummy mummies needing their conscience pricked. Adele Horan doesn't beat around the bush. She reported in the Sydney Morning Herald that these are women who spend too many hours on wacky internet health sites and become convinced that immunisation is a great conspiracy. She further described these parents as the educated mother who thinks she knows better than the overwhelming majority of the world's scientists and doctors. And as you can imagine, she received some pretty nasty letters the following day. She also said this: around the world, resistance to vaccination is strongest amongst the affluent and educated. These statements are supported by Arthur Allen, author of the book Vaccine, A History of Immunisation. He observed that living in a place with a high percentage of PhDs is a risk factor for whooping cough. Scathing stuff indeed. But in a case of backward logic, the anti-vaxxers have actually claimed this for themselves, loudly proclaiming, parents continue to be accused of being ignorant, uncaring and stupid for refusing vaccines, which the medical community claim will keep their children healthy, when the truth is, older, highly educated parents form the basis of the anti-immunisation lobby. Not something to be proud of, I would have thought. However, one wonders if these are the parents glued to morning television, where the likes of Meryl Dorry from the Australian Vaccination Network can regularly be seen spouting her misinformed anti-vax nonsense. Yes, people, we have our own version of Jenny McCarthy in Australia. We are not immune. Now, the innocuously titled Australian Vaccination Network, fronted by the screeching Meryl Dorry, go by the catchphrase, "Love them, protect them, never inject them." She is regularly given a platform on morning television shows in Australia, such as Mornings with Kerry-Anne Kennelly. In defence of Kerry-Anne Kennelly, they usually have a representative from the sensible side, in this case Dr. Penny Adams. However, just like the overseas breeds, Meryl is not shy about exposing her ignorance to a national audience.
Well, Meryl, what's wrong with vaccinating?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of vaccination, but unfortunately there isn't a whole lot of science to back it up. Dr. Penny said that if we get enough people vaccinated, we'll see the diseases wiped out.
Sorry, could I just...
Yes.
And I don't want to seem to interrupt, but you say not enough science to back it up. I'm a lay person. I just know this information says we've been polio-free since 2000. That, to me, says there's a bit of science that polio vaccinations work.
Need I say more? However, as a further demonstration of how little the Australian Vaccination Network understand about science and medicine, I will use an article written by them known as 10 Reasons Why Not to Vaccinate. Reason 1. Vaccines have never been tested. This statement encompasses the full gamut of how little the Australian Vaccination Network know about how the drug development process works. I won't bore you with the details of this today, but I will tell you it takes millions of dollars, around 10 years, and at least 4 phases of testing, which continues even after the drug is released. Evidence that this process works can be found in the case of a vaccine for the rotavirus called RotaShield, which was released in the US in 1998. In pre-licensure trials, the vaccine appeared to be safe, but in post-licensure surveillance, it was associated with an increased risk of intussusception, which is a rare form of bowel obstruction occurring in infants. As soon as this problem was discovered, the vaccine was withdrawn from the market and RotaShield was never released in Australia. Number 2. Vaccines contain toxic additives and heavy metals. Well, here the AVN are of course scaremongering with thimerosal, which is the mercury-based preservative that has been used in very small amounts in some vaccines since the 1930s to prevent bacterial and fungal contamination. But there is no evidence that thimerosal has caused any health problems, except perhaps minor reactions such as redness at the injection site. In any case, thimerosal was removed from childhood vaccines as a precaution in 2000. And some vaccines, such as pneumococcal vaccines, the MMR, and other live attenuated viral vaccines never contained thimerosal. Whilst there are certain vaccines for adults in Australia that still contain thimerosal, the levels are extremely low, much lower than the level of exposure we obtain to mercury in our daily lives. I don't have the time or energy to discuss all the claims made by the Australian Vaccination Network in this article, except to say that they are full of accusations and conspiracies we have come to expect from these people. These include such gems as the pharmaceutical companies have paid for all the vaccine studies to date, therefore they are flawed. And then there's this extraordinary claim. Some childhood illnesses have beneficial aspects and therefore prevention may not necessarily be in the interests of the child. You really think so, Meryl Dorry? Well, why don't we use one example of a childhood illness, whooping cough, which can be vaccinated for, and look at whether it's in the interest of the child to contract it. I choose whooping cough since Australia is currently experiencing an epidemic. Now, according to some reports, more than 8,300 cases were reported in New South Wales last year. In October 2008, 40 cases were reported from the same school, and the health service said that most of these cases were in children who had not been immunised. Whooping cough is caused by the bacterium Bordetella pertussis. Babies are vaccinated against whooping cough at 2 months then boosted at 4 months, 6 months and 4 years. A booster dose is also recommended for adolescents and certain adults such as healthcare workers and those who work with young babies. In young children, whooping cough is particularly serious, where 1 in every 200 babies who contract the infection will die. Some can even crack their ribs through violent coughing attacks. A recent report about the epidemic cited the story of a 14-week-old girl who has had whooping cough since she was 2 weeks old. Her terrified mother said she had turned blue several times during coughing fits as she gasped for air. Whooping cough is not a disease you want to mess with. It causes considerable morbidity. The disease is particularly serious in small children as it can cause them to stop breathing. The whoop, which is not always obvious, is due to a deep breath at the end of a bout of coughing, and vomiting after coughing is common. Severe complications which occur almost exclusively in unvaccinated people include seizures and pneumonia. In babies under 6 months of age, the symptoms can be severe or life-threatening and include hemorrhage, apnea, which is when you stop breathing for short or long periods of time, pneumonia, inflammation of the brain, convulsions and coma, permanent brain damage, and death. According to health officials in New South Wales, the recent epidemic of whooping cough is likely a result of a reduction in vaccination. The North Coast Area Health Service Director of Public Health, Paul Corbin, said, "Communities with low vaccination rates have had more than 8 times the rate of disease seen in those areas with the highest vaccination rates." Well, according to the Australian Vaccination Network, you don't need to vaccinate against whooping cough. Sometimes it's better for kids to just catch it. And although this organisation is relatively small, they do have a lot of influence and are also well organised and very active. Australian listeners may remember the case of parents who fled hospital and the authorities with their newborn boy in August 2008 to avoid having to have him vaccinated for hepatitis B. The sad thing was the mother was hepatitis B positive herself. And although it is not compulsory to be vaccinated in Australia, it is Health Department policy that children born of hepatitis B positive mothers are offered immunoglobulin for the child within 12 hours of birth and 4 doses of the vaccine over 6 months. In a tragic tale of ignorance, the mother told reporters that the couple believed aluminium in the vaccine could cause him more damage than the child contracting hepatitis B. And of course, the father is a member of the Australian Vaccination Network, by which the couple are now touted as heroes. Australia also has the usual suspects, such as the chiropractors who don't proclaim it from the rooftops, but upon questioning will tell you not to vaccinate. They will also follow the MMR autism line, and I had one tell me this at a recent Mothers, Babies and Pregnancy Expo. And of course, we can't forget the despicable homeopaths, who will also tell you on the sly that you can use homeopathy to vaccinate your kids. I won't discuss this further today because A, it makes me too angry, and B, it requires its own show entirely. For more information about the myths and realities of vaccination, the Australian government publishes a brochure called Vaccination Myths and Realities, responding to arguments against immunisation. This is a thoroughly researched and easy-to-read resource which addresses fact and fiction about immunisation. It's also useful even if you are not in Australia, and particularly good for passing the way of anyone you know who might have some dodgy ideas about the merits of vaccination. For further reading and the references for this story, head to my blog, which is linked from skepticzone.tv, and thank you to everyone who has been emailing me and leaving comments on the blog. Also, don't forget I have another blog at skepticsbook.com. And until next time, this has been Dr. Rachie Reports.
Breaking news. Science was arrested yesterday for exposing itself in public on a website called smartax.com. Science denied any wrongdoing. In a statement, smartax.com said they would do it again. And again. And again. smartax.com.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
afternoon or good morning, as James Randi would say, and welcome to the Think Tank. Cheers!
Cheers!
Cheers! Cheers! Cheers! Oh, that's better. Nice, cheap champagne. I'm joined tonight by Eran Segev. G'day, Eran.
Hello.
Dr. Rachie, Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm fine, and thank you for your report earlier in the show. Good as ever. And some guy we found on the street, Dave, the happy singer.
Hello.
Hello, Dave. Welcome back.
Thank you. Did you miss me?
Yeah, we did.
We always miss you.
We always miss you, Dave, the happy singer. I'm going to start straight off in this think tank. I want to give a big shout out to my good friend Moriel, otherwise known as Mooey Poo.
Hi, Mooey Poo.
Hi, Mooey Poo.
Hello.
Now, she's involved with a new site called smartaxe.com. And axe as in chopping the tree axe. Smartaxe.com. She says it's the sort of the naughtiest side of science. And I think, Rachel, there's something on there to do, well, there will be soon to do with breasts, so...
I've heard a rumour about that, Richard. I'm not sure what she's... well, she has got some stuff up there already about oscillating breasts, but I don't want to give anything away. I'm not sure what is actually up there at this point.
Yes.
Oscillating breasts?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
like
the
water
physics
divining
of...
or something.
No, it's explaining physics through oscillation. And...
I've seen water diviners use all sorts of things. I really have.
Are you suggesting they could use something else apart from rods?
Yeah.
Well, there's another euphemism.
I'm miming this. I realise it's an audio-based medium, but I can't describe this idea I've got other than in a kind of mime.
I wish this was video. Now, folks...
What are oscillating breasts?
Well, they're breasts that oscillate, really.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Smart axe, is that with an E on axe?
It is.
Or without?
With
because
an
the Americans do it without an E,
They
don't
do.
Yeah.
It is S-A-M-A... Wait a minute. This is Homer Simpson, isn't it?
SMARTAXE.com.
I am so smart. S-M-A-T... I mean, S-M-A-R... Smartaxe.com.
Are you okay, Eran?
I'm just glad I'm silent.
Smartaxe.com. Now, folks, with that level of mirth here at this side of the world...
Did you say mirth or mirth?
Mirth. Visit smartaxe.com and find out more, because Mooey Poo has done a tremendous amount of very funny science videos.
And she's just relaunched this website as well, Richard, hasn't she?
Yes,
it's quite new. It's
quite
really,
new.
really worth a look. It's really
Please visit smartaxe.com. So, Rachel, what do you have for us tonight?
Oh, I've got a story about a driver in Brisbane who was accused of drink driving recently. This story appeared in the Brisbane Courier Mail on the 18th of February, and it was a case of a gentleman who was picked up for drink driving. He was found by police in his car wearing only his underpants.
Oh.
And when police tapped on his window and woke him up, he said he had no recollection of what happened. But his blood alcohol reading was 3 times the legal limit. It was 0.176. And in Australia, the legal limit is 0.05.
Yep.
And when he went to court, he claimed that he had had 1 glass of wine and then took 2 homeopathic sleeping tablets an hour later. And his last memory is waking up when ambulance officers were tapping on the window of his car. So he went to court and told the judge that it must have been the homeopathic sleeping tablets. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, allegedly he had 1 glass of wine. I suspect he may have had a few more glasses than 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well...
Don't you feel fortunate to live in a country where the judge doesn't buy a claim like that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention that, Eran, because the judge fined him $1,000 and disqualified him from driving for 9 months.
Yes, but it was a homeopathic fine, so he'll be out next week or doing it next week.
Well, no, it wasn't a homeopathic fine, but you're right. But I guess if it was a homeopathic glass of wine, maybe it was super, super strong.
Or super, super weak, which meant it was super, super strong.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I mean. So it was super, super dilute, therefore it was very strong. So that's probably why 1 glass resulted in him being 3 times over the legal limit. And interestingly enough, he is also a national ballroom dancer champion.
Oh.
In fact, just as an aside, that may have been of interest to some people.
And to all the homeopaths out there, we don't buy it for a second.
How many people, though, that are ballroom dancers sit around drinking in their underpants? Or do you think he maybe stripped off before he got...
I always drink in my mouth, not my underpants.
I was actually wondering, when you said how many people, I was thinking, how many people who are homeopaths actually listening to this show? About two.
Yeah. Well, how many ballroom dancers drink in their underpants? Anyway, he was charged, so the judge didn't, as you mentioned, Iran, didn't buy the fact that it was a homeopathic sleeping tablet. Richard, you know something about homeopathic sleeping tablets, don't you? I believe you've been involved in an incident or a stunt where you attempted to overdose on homeopathic sleeping tablets. Yeah, there
was the 2004 Australian Skeptics Convention here in Sydney, and myself and a group of skeptics consumed handfuls of homeopathic sleeping tablets in front of a live audience.
And what happened, Richard? Did you fall asleep?
I haven't slept since, which is a bit weird, but...
It's actually not weird at all, because if you think of it, the less homeopathic tablets you take, the more potent.
Yes. Now, James Randi does this a lot. He'll quaff handfuls of homeopathic sleeping tablets. Yeah, they're just sugar pills, so it really doesn't matter.
Does it give you any response? Do you at least get a sugar high? Or
nothing? No.
Nothing at all?
Because they're tiny, they're minuscule, these tablets, and they cost a fortune for a packet of them. I mean, we outlaid a couple of $100 to get enough so the 4 or 5 of us, or 6 or whatever it was, at the front of the audience could all have a handful and go plum, 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 nom, 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 and eat them all. And no, it was a funny stunt, but it was to make a serious point. But the public are being sold, what's the word? Shams. Placebos.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the next story. Let me talk about ghosts.
Ooh, ghosts.
What's a ghost?
What's a ghost? That's a good question. I don't know.
Neither do I.
I
keep asking people.
Yeah, what's a ghost? Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day on the internet, and we were talking about ghosts, and he says, a ghost's a spirit, and God is the greatest spirit of all. And I said, no, single malt Scotch whiskey is the greatest spirit of all.
That's a funny joke from Dave, the Happy Singer.
You can cut that one out.
No, he won't.
I won't. All right, in Derby in England, they've had some problems with a ghost. And this is reported today. No, sorry, I beg your pardon. It was reported in January, so it's slightly old, maybe, but ghosts can hang around for a long time. Surgical spirit spooks hospital. Staff at a state-of-the-art hospital have called in a chaplain after being spooked by a ghost, but have denied claims there are plans to carry out an exorcism. This is at in Derby, in the UK, Derby's new Royal Hospital. Some people working there have reported being scared by a ghost. And there are reports that they're calling in a chaplain to maybe perform an exorcism, which is odd. And apparently this hospital has been built on what was once a Roman road, and there's speculation that the ghost is a Roman soldier.
Has anyone actually seen the ghost? Do they have vision of it? Is that why they call it a Roman soldier?
Well, that's a very good question. But apparently there are reports of workers there being spooked. Spooked. Yes. Spooked by apparitions or a ghost. And the quote here is very strange. It said, experts said the surgical spirit could be the ghost of a Roman soldier. Experts?
Oh, experts. Well, experts, Richard, that means they know everything, doesn't it? They're not specific about what experts are they?
No, ghost experts.
Ghost experts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
With EMF detectors.
Equipment.
Yeah. And now the senior manager, Debbie Butler, has written, I'm not sure how many of you are aware that some members of our staff have reported seeing a ghost. I'm taking it seriously, as the last thing I want is staff feeling uneasy at work.
The last thing you want?
I'm just wondering about why a chaplain? I mean, if you have ghosts, don't you call dementors or something?
No.
Dementors? You mean from Harry Potter?
If there's something strange in your neighbourhood, who are you going to call?
The dog catchers?
The dog catchers.
Ghostbusters!
You call
Yeah, but they were only around in the 80s.
More seriously, why a chaplain?
Yeah, good question.
No, but they do that
It's a
around.
Roman ghost.
Catholic chaplains do exorcisms.
This is in Derby, surely. I mean, in Derby they've burnt all the Catholics a long time ago.
But why not call
That's
in
true,
the local Christians? Or the
Do they
Hindus?
get-
Well, it's a Roman ghost. So we need to know whether it's
So he
before
would
or
have been
after
Catholic, right?
Constantine converted the Roman Empire to Christianity.
They'll have to
That's a
call
good
in,
point. Well, it does say in the article 1920s, doesn't it?
Well, because like,
It was first built in the
if it's left- when was
1920s.
that? Was that 400 AD? Something like that. So after that, then a chaplain. But if it's from before then you're going to have to get somebody who knows about.
But do you have to be that
Roman.
specific about ghosts? Do you have to know what era they came from and therefore
Well,
you
it
are
helps if you
selective?
speak the right language, doesn't it? If you're going to cast them out, you need to know
I
how
thought
to
you
say
just
it.
went
They
hum
all
hum
speak
hum.
English, don't you know? Ghosts
all
speak English. Yeah,
That would be embarrassing, though. I think. I mean, if the priest came in and said, "Ghost, depart this world," blah blah blah, and the ghost said back in Latin, "Sorry, mate, can't understand a bloody word you're saying," it would be embarrassing.
Richard, that's not how it works.
Oh, it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't
Oh, I'm
work
sorry,
like
I'm
that. You don't you listen to what John Edwards says about things like that?
What does he say?
He says he gets messages that he can't always translate, but he can only understand pictures and images. And he has been asked directly in the past, what if the ghost speaks a different language? And he says, but they speak to me in images. They don't speak a language specifically.
Oh, well, that makes it all clear then.
I'm actually thinking, again, this being from Derby, what if the ghost answered with a Mancunian accent? That could be really bad.
That could be, because that's quite hard to understand.
It's a shame because there's not much work for Latin translators out there.
No,
Yeah. Not at least not interpreters.
that's true. But this maybe is a niche that could be opened up, Dave. What do you think?
It could be good.
Yeah,
If we
possibly.
can find some classicists who can translate ghosts.
Now, I would like to put out a plea to listeners in the Sydney region. If you know of or are plagued by ghosts in your house or your local area, please contact us. We'd love to investigate, wouldn't we, Rachel?
We would, yeah.
We would.
I wouldn't.
I'd like to.
You speak multiple languages, don't you,
I
Dave?
speak 4 languages. Yeah, we could maybe get
A German ghost?
a German ghost, or
A Dutch ghost?
Dutch ghost, a French ghost.
Dutch could be, because the Dutch have been here before Cook.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if we can, if you've got a Dutch ghost, then I want to meet him. I'll come. I'll bring my pack, my backpack.
What, with the Ghostbusters
Yeah,
logo on the back?
I want to do this. I want to do this.
Do you have the overalls as well?
No, I don't, but I'll get them. If there's a ghost out there, I will so dress up as the Ghostbusters, and I will come and sort out your ghost problem. Dutch, German, French, English, whatever. Let's do this. Oh, it's brilliant. Did you hear about the superhero guys? I think they were in Melbourne.
I don't know.
I think they're just like a bunch of kind of fairly well-to-do chaps who set up a league of superheroes, and they chipped in all their money and put a TV ad out. I think it was in Melbourne. You're going to have to Google this and fact-check it. But they put out a TV ad saying, any problems, we're your heroes. If you've got anything you want us to solve, ring this number. And when they ring up, they would put their masks on and get out in their car and go and get cats out of trees and actually play at superheroes. Whatever you wanted them to do, they'd come and solve your problem.
Sounds like the goodies, doesn't it?
They did it in real life. How awesome is that?
That's cool. Is that still happening?
I'm not sure. It was something like the Superhero League of Australia or something. If you Google it, you'll find it.
Is Elastigirl part of the
story? Sorry?
Is Elastigirl part of the...
Oh, you mean from The Incredibles?
Yes.
Oh, how hot was she? I mean, when you're talking cartoon Totty, she was almost Jessica Rabbit, wasn't she?
She was.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of ghosties, can I talk about a UFO?
Wait. Speaking of ghosties, can I talk about a UFO and you accuse me of bad segues?
No, that's a segue. That connects UFOs and ghosties.
Go on.
Well, this is actually quite an old story, but it comes from England, from Lincolnshire. And it's a story about a wind farm turbine that was damaged a couple of weeks ago by a mystery aircraft. And it was reported that the 3 blades, one of them was bent and one of them actually ended up on the ground. And people reported that at the time they saw a white light flashing around very quickly. And so ufologists said that they'd received many reports of activity and they were searching for clues.
How do you flash around slowly? Sorry, go on.
Do you want more information about that?
Yes.
A round white light that seemed to be hovering.
Ooh.
According to Councillor Robert
You never
Palmer.
see those in the sky, do you?
Never.
A round
you don't.
white light hovering in the sky at night.
No, because it wouldn't be the moon, listeners, would it? No.
Or flashing by slowly.
No, but you don't understand. Let me explain. The only way to explain it is it wasn't a flare-like light. It was just round white with a slight red edge to it that seemed to be over the wind turbines.
Did it have grey blotches over it?
You mean like a happy face or something? That looked a bit cheesy?
Did it look like it was made of cheese? Or...
I don't know, but I have to tell you there were numerous reports about this alleged white light with red outlines. And a gentleman by the name of Russ Kellett from the Flying Saucer Bureau.
This isn't a UK government agency.
That up?
No, I didn't make that up. This is from BBC News. This article.
Because somebody had to make up that name.
Flying Saucer
Bureau. And I was hoping it might be you.
No, I didn't make it up. It's here. It's got pink highlighter on it, which means...
No, we know the BBC didn't make it up because they don't have any humour. So surely that guy must have made up that name.
The Flying Saucer Bureau. FSB. It's even hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he said that this is the second most reports of activity we have ever had. I've had over 30 phone calls and emails. And he says to hit 2 blades, any object must have been about 170 feet long. Now, this is his explanation.
Does he know that because of his expertise with flying saucers and all the past events where flying saucers have hit the blades of wind turbines?
I don't think so, Iran. It's not mentioned in this article, but I'm not sure if that's the case.
I don't understand how you would have to be 170 feet long to damage 2 blades on a wind turbine. I mean, they come together in a hub.
And they're travelling very quickly. They're rotating, spinning. Yeah.
I mean, you could do that.
That's true, Dave. But let me offer you a more mundane explanation.
The remnants of a light blade will find nearby.
It wasn't a flying saucer.
I don't know, but let me just offer you this and you can decide. But this comes from technical experts. Okay, technical experts have suggested. In fact, Dr. Peter Schubel from the University of Nottingham is an expert in the design and manufacture of wind turbine blades. And he said that it would need to be the equivalent of a 10-ton load to do that kind of damage. But if it was rotating or hit by a moving object, the force could be a lot less. So his explanation was that it's definitely not a bird. However, it could be ice thrown from a neighbouring turbine that struck it. So apparently, according to Dr. Peter Schubel, most turbines have an anti-icing system on the blades, but sometimes they fail. So perhaps if it was spinning at enough of a rate, ice could have flown off of the other one.
Flew off, hit the other turbine.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah. However, the Ministry of Defence in the UK, and we've spoken about them before actually because they released their UFO files a few months ago, remember? Which was very interesting. They haven't established whether there was any sort of hostile or unauthorised military activity in the area at the time. So it seems like the jury's out on whether it was a UFO.
Probably was a UFO. I'm just
I
not
dare
sure
say
it's a
the
flying
jury's
saucer.
going to starve to death being out.
They're
not coming back anytime soon.
Do you not think there'd be an awful lot more UFOs if we'd just stop identifying flying objects?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
If we'd just stop identifying them, there'd be UFOs everywhere and everybody would be happy.
That's a good point. We should stop identifying them.
I was ready for the segue.
Yes.
I saw a lot of happy people today. See, happy.
Happy? Oh, yeah.
Oh, did you? What happened to you today,
Just like
Richard?
Dave the happy
Were they happier than me?
No. They were very happy. I went to the Macquarie University, as listeners would have heard earlier in the show, with my brief report with Duane, the president of the Macquarie Skeptics. I spent a day there at their open week, at their stall there at the university, and the response was just fantastic. It was really heartening. Lots of young students coming along, fascinated by things like spoon bending, water divining, and it's the old stuff that really got them. Now these are kids in their late teens, early 20s, and to them, hauntings and ghosties and UFOs and all ESP, that's all really interesting stuff. And I keep trying to remind some skeptics out there who said, that's all been debunked and we don't care about that anymore, we need to move on. And one of the points is, no, there's generations keep coming up, and that's what they're interested in. So there's something there we need to address, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, like Loch Ness, for example, the Loch Ness Monster. Bigfoot's been around for how long? Forever.
It's true, but the young generations coming up, they learn about it, they're interested in it. They don't know it's all been debunked.
No, that's right. And the Bermuda Triangle is still an area of people being fascinated by it, even though it's been debunked. If you don't know why it's been debunked and how, you're still interested in that. And I have to say, Richard, spoon bending is still...
Spoon bending
is still a great thing, even when you know how it's done, it still looks great when people do it.
It's good fun. We were bending, I don't know, I must have bent about 50 spoons today. Again and again and again. Because the young students, they've never seen it before. It's a great magic trick and they're completely freaked out. It's a great... Thank you, Mr. Geller. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm sure Mr. Geller listens to the podcast.
I think this stuff is fascinating. I think part of what attracts maybe not all of us, but some of us to like the kind of the skeptic movement thing is that we're equally interested in ideas like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and the UFOs. And we just come at it from an evidence-based angle, but these stories are just as much part of our culture as they are the true believers' culture.
That's a very good way of looking at it. They're part of our culture. And they're part of our heritage.
The other thing is that these things seem to move with pop culture, and that when sci-fi was all about the space age and the space race, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. There was loads of talk about aliens and stuff, and nowadays we've got more things that kind of talk about quantum physics, and that's like people like Deepak Chopra taking quantum theory.
But it's not unique. We see around these things that can't be. It's in UFOs and the abducting aliens, and I mentioned it in my autism segment a few weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
There's certain things that are culturally related, and you find that as the culture advances, these things suddenly appear. You see it around the vaccines. The reasons for objecting to vaccines differ from country to country.
Yeah, true.
And these are it's quite common when you don't think critically. You're just affected by your environment. You make your woo fit with whatever you know. So it's not really unique.
I was reading a fundy site. Oh, we're back onto religion again. Look, if you're really into the religion stuff, come and listen to me on Critical Mass, because we talk about this all the time. But there was a guy the other day saying that gays do have the rights to get married. A gay man can marry a gay woman anytime he wants to. Deary me. Any more woo-woo?
I'm not going to provide any links. Actually, on the Young Australians, All Australian Skeptics website, they have a link, or they have it embedded, right? The
Young Australian Skeptics.
Young Australian Skeptics have the video of Fred Phelps.
Oh, right.
Fred Phelps went on a tirade against Australia, as he's wont. That's what he does.
That video.
It's a very troubling video if you don't know who Fred Phelps is, or you don't realise that he regularly forgets to take his medication. But if you don't know, it's very troubling, because he talks about how wonderful it is that Australians have been burning, and those of you who got thus far in this podcast know that I've been doing a bit of work on the fires, and
yes,
and people are hurt and lying in hospitals and grieving the dead, and this guy goes on this tirade, and the Westboro Baptist Church were going to picket the memorial held last Saturday.
The Young Skeptics went along, didn't they?
And they tried to locate them, and fortunately for the Westboro Baptist Church people, they were not found. I have an idea that, or have this thought that in Australia there would people would not be as tolerant as they are in America of this kind of religious madness.
However, if you want to see the press release of what they said about picketing the National Day of Mourning, go to ratbags.com and you can see the full press release. It's really offensive.
All they're about is getting publicity for their cause. It didn't matter whether they actually intended to come to the arena.
Yeah.
Their point is, by making this press release, they got onto the news.
Yeah.
Again, they do it for the publicity.
That's a good point, yeah.
So cut this out of the podcast, Richard, because it's more publicity.
They're not about getting converts. So, they know very well that we're not going to go to the Westboro Baptist. So they say all this outrageous stuff, and a bunch of nutters they are. Bless them. Well, I mean, metaphorically speaking.
But good on the young Australian skeptics having a go. And now they've got a very good podcast.
I love the young Australian
Isn't it
skeptics.
good stuff?
They absolutely, and they listen to this and the critical
Of course
mass.
they are. I mean, we're all the same. We're all on the same. We're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction.
Hello, pseudoscientists.
Hello, pseudoscientists.
Hello, Jack. Hello, Skelliot.
Hello, guys.
Hello, Darlene. Hello, Alistair.
Maybe if I ask them really nicely, they'll plug DaveTheHappySinger.com.
It had to happen, folks. It had to happen. All right. Well, with that friendly note to our good friends at the Young Australian Skeptics, I'd like to thank Dave, the Happy Singer, of course.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And Eran Segev, thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
And thank you for a grain of salt. Good as ever. And as the door shuts in the corner, thank you, Rachael Dunlop.
Thank you,
And thank you for Dr. Rachie Reports.
Thank you.
Thank you. And until next time, this has been The Think Tank. Cheers.
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 Richard, wake up!
Huh?
Wake up! It's the end of the show.
Oh, sorry, it was so intense I fell asleep.
I know, I'm sorry. Look, we've been working you too hard, Richard. You're wearing too many hats. You're a jack of too many trades and a master of all of them.
Oh.
But, it's just too much. So you're allowed to have a power nap every now and then.
Thanks, I do appreciate that. A power nap, recharge the batteries. I'm ready for the next show in 1 week, which will be a special show.
Yes. What's any news on next week yet?
Oh, yeah, but I can't say it. Such big news, our special guest.
Ooh.
It's a bit of a secret at the moment. They said not to mention it yet. In other words, I'm still working that out.
Oh, right. Oh, don't tell the listeners that. They think you've really got something lined up. No, it's going to be good as usual. We always get good guests here on the Zone.
We do.
And thanks, listeners, for hanging in there, because the show's going really well. We're getting lots of good feedback, and we're really enjoying doing it.
And thanks for leaving comments on our blog and our comments page, all at www.skepticzone.tv.
Yes, that too. And don't forget also there's a little PayPal donation button there, because, of course, we're all volunteers, and there are expenses in running a show like this. So if you do enjoy the show and you'd like to see us keep doing what we do and using these high-tech gadgets that we use, it'd be nice to just get a little bit of a subsidy from you. So, yeah, go to PayPal.
It really does help, because owing to the generosity of our listeners, I've been able to get 3 of our reporters complete digital recording kits.
Oh, that is awesome.
So it's really good. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, hence the show going onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards.
All right, well, look, have a great one. We'll see you next week, Richard?
Yep.
All righty.
Bye, Steph.
Thank you. See ya.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.